Hello, everyone out there. Welcome to this week's episode of Are You There, Ghost? It's me, Chiwan. Today, I'm super excited, happy, and honored that amazing writer from LA, Cassandra Lane, is joining me. A little bit about her: she's from Louisiana, so she went from LA to LA, basically. Um, she was the first black and first woman editor in chief of her school newspaper, where she studied journalism. She moved to LA in 2001 to get her MFA at Antioch, and she's worked for all kinds of places, including as community relations manager for the Los Angeles Dodgers, and she is currently managing editor of LA Parent magazine. And most recently, she's the author of this award winning memoir, We Are Bridges. Please welcome Cassandra Lane. Hello, Cassandra.
Hi, Chiwan. Oh my gosh, it's so good to see you. So good to be on this amazing show. Congratulations
Uh,
again.
Thank you and congratulations to you. First of all,
You.
as we were talking earlier, beautiful wallpaper. uh,
Thank you. It steals the show.
I'm
And I
like,
had to put
man,
Billy there, she
yeah.
just makes it
I'm
pop.
like, man, my couch is looking raggedy.
It's not. I love your
I'm
background
like,
actually.
God damn
I I love
it.
it. And I love are
uh,
those windows or is that a screen?
yeah, those are those
The French.
window, yeah, doors that go into the
Oh,
dining room. Rent is cheap here in Pittsburgh.
I love that.
um, so how are you?
I'm doing good. I'm going on a last minute work assignment tomorrow and just trying to wrap up work and get ready for that work assignment. It'll be the first, cruise or out of the country trip that I've done since the pandemic. So I'm a little bit on
Oh wow.
edge. And also it's last minute. I mean, they are taking care to be super cautious, taking all the
Yeah, yeah.
precautions. But yes, I'm a little like nerve
So
wracked
your
right.
assignment is on a cruise ship.
It is. I know, right? That's such a mess.
How do you do it, Cassandra?
How am I even complaining?
Our sympathies go with
Right.
you.
I know my siblings, when we were on our family group text, they were just dogging me out. They were like, oh, yeah, we feel so bad for you.
How long a
Um,
trip and where to?
it's 3 day, 3 to 4 days. I haven't even had a chance to read everything. It's to the Mexican Riviera. Um, we leave tomorrow, is what I know, and they're just getting all the passport and other essential information now. I am
Mhm.
bringing the fam, so my husband and son are going.
Oh, good,
So
good,
just
good.
scrambling to get all of that done. And I've never done a cruise or wanted to do a cruise. But it'll be my mom's like, oh, you have to do it. And I was like, maybe when I'm 70. So I texted him. I was like, "Well, it looks like I'm going to be doing that cruise after all before retirement age." But it's cool. It's going to be a small, intimate group of journalists and writers,
Mm.
and I'm sure it's a few other folks too. So it will be controlled, and I think it'll just be cool for my husband and son.
Oh yeah, yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
a friend recently went on a cruise ship and she said it was super safe. Like
Okay.
you had to have
That
they
is.
went through all kinds of protocols for you to even get on the ship. So
Oh, that's good to know.
yeah,
That's good to know.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Awesome.
yeah. How is your son?
He's good. He's 14. You can imagine. He
Does he
keeps saying
understand that you're an author? I mean, does he get a sense of like what that means and all that?
he does. He's so proud. I would say he's one of my biggest cheerleaders.
Ah,
He started reading the book. He hasn't finished it. He's a Gemini, so his mind is like scattered on so many different things. But he's definitely one of my biggest cheerleaders. His friends know I'm a writer. He's
that's
he's at that age where he's
amazing.
either completely embarrassed by us or proud. So
That's
sometimes he's
amazing.
proud.
Yeah, I think I met him one time.
You did, you
Yeah,
did. Yeah, he
he had
thinks
all
I'm my
his
writer.
Dodgers gear
So
on.
Yeah, yeah. He's so cool, right? He's so stylish. He thinks all of my writer friends are really cool. And I think that's been such a blessing for him to be exposed to so many of you guys.
Uh-huh.
So just his, just his, and his parents are older too. So just his kind of understanding of the world is
Uh-huh.
really, I think, fascinating. When I think
Yeah.
back to my own teenagehood.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
What was
Yeah.
your
How are you?
teenagehood like?
Yeah, he keeps saying, "Mom, it's not the '80s. Things are so different now, Mom." I'm like, "But the '80s were cool. Like, how did the '80s become so ancient?" That's his. I was like, if you say it's not the '80s one more time,
Oh my god. It's
can
not the
you
80s,
imagine?
mom, or the 90s, or the two,
Right?
or the aughts, or the
I mean, weren't we
like.
the cool kids? We were
I
Gen
mean,
X.
you might have been. I don't know if I was a cool kid, but
I mean, no, I was totally not a cool kid like in the moment because I was
uh,
definitely part of a tiny little nerd group. But I mean, just in terms of our generation, Gen X and the music and
yeah,
art and,
yeah.
yeah.
Do you ever go back to Louisiana?
The last time I was there, I don't go as often because my mom moved to Florida many, many years ago, and all of my elders are gone now. I have tons of cousins, first, second, third cousins still there. But usually when I go back to the South now, it's to Florida to see mom and my siblings.
Mm,
But we were all there in January of 2020 for my last uncle's funeral. My mom had
mm-hmm.
7 brothers, and Uncle Junior passed right before the shutdown. And so we were all there. My son got a chance to meet a ton of cousins. He had a ball outside of the funeral, of course. But that was, yeah, it was such a meaningful trip. And I think the last time before that, 2018, I took him and my husband to New Orleans, where I also lived. I didn't grow up there, but that was where I worked. The last newspaper I worked for, the last city that I lived in Louisiana. We saw friends, explored, and it was just an amazing, amazing time. New Orleans is still my favorite place.
What city were you born?
In DeRidder, Louisiana, which is the town we went to for Uncle Junior's funeral. It's a small
Mm,
town, military town. Especially back then, there was a military base 20 miles up the road. My mom worked on it for many, many years. Um, no movie theater, one school everybody went to, despite your race, your income level. Everybody went to the same public school. There was no mall. We had to go to Lake Charles, which is like 45 miles south, to go to the mall. Very, very small. Yeah,
Did you
but very
leave?
rich too, in a lot of,
Yeah,
we
yeah,
knew about the land. From with gardening, and then I had other cousins who farmed. One cousin was just reminding me the other day how you had to get up, every summer morning at like 3, 4 in the morning and go farm. And he was like, "You guys had it easy with your little garden in the backyard."
yeah.
So yeah, a lot of rich experiences, a lot of
Yeah,
great memories. So
yeah. Um, you know, I was we had Jamie Attenberg, the novelist, on our
yeah,
show before,
yeah,
and
I love
she
her.
lives in New Orleans now, and she was telling us
Mm-hmm.
about her learning about all the wild, like haunted stuff down there. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and from everything, I've never been to New Orleans, but
Oh, you
everything,
have to go.
every TV show, every movie, it's like Spook Fest, right?
Yes.
What
Chiwan,
was
you
it
would love
like for
it.
real to grow up around there?
Yeah. How can we get you there? Oh my God, you would absolutely love it.
Uh, Put me on an assignment to
Right? I'm gonna look into that one. Oh
for
my God.
LA Parent Magazine.
Right. Exactly. I did do one a couple of years ago on, Mardi Gras, just that whole LA to LA connection, because there are so many Louisianians out here in LA, and I didn't know that, when I first moved here. But as part of the Great Migration, so many Black families
Mm,
came out here, and that's why you see, the snow cone shop down the street. all these Creole restaurant cafes. So I did do that. So yeah, I'll have to cook up something else so you can get down there.
Yay, let's go.
Let's go.
um,
We're always threatening to meet. Some friends and I are always threatening to just jump on a plane and meet there for the weekend because they're just going to take you in from
yeah,
community book one of my favorite bookstores, community book center, black owned, woman
right.
owned. They're just like, come on home, come down.
Yeah. I'm gonna be on the Mega Bus website after this going bus to New Orleans.
Exactly, yeah.
um you said you were all into like ghost spooky stuff. Like, is that from your childhood or from watching movies? Where's it from?
Oh my gosh, I was so excited when I first saw the trailer for your podcast. I'm like, yes. I'm just fascinated by it. I think probably I remember seeing my first horror film if I was 5. And my parents, when they were still together, took us to a double feature. And I think it was, well, for sure, it was one of the films was The Exorcist, and I think Dracula. Um, and I don't know, instead of getting frightened to the point where I couldn't see scary movies again, I was obsessed.
Mm-hmm.
And there were they especially back then in the 70s and 80s, the horror films really a lot of them tied to I like psychological horror. Look, there was always kind of a religious, undertone
Mm-hmm.
to a lot of them. And it didn't seem that it seemed familiar to me with some of the storylines in terms
Mm-hmm.
of, my own family's stories in the church. My mother, sisters, grandparents who talked about their ghost stories and in a real way, like this is what I saw, this is what came to me. I was wide awake. Um, I couldn't move even though I was
Mm-hmm.
wide awake. And so those are stories that I just heard growing up. And these movies didn't, they just seemed a part of this larger, supernatural world, even though I didn't necessarily myself have those kinds of experiences while I was awake.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it just I don't know, it fascinates me, that world. And I think that world enters my psyche when I'm dreaming. I've had very vivid dreams. My mom is always repeating different experiences that she's had. And I just love the way the movies put those stories together,
Yeah. Is there a story from a family member, your mom or anybody else that sticks to you the most?
Yeah, well, I'll talk about my great grandmother because the book We Are Bridges, deals with the story of my great grandparents and how their love was cut short by the lynching of my great grandfather, Bert Bridges. And I talk in the book about seeing great grandma Mary because I remember her very well. She was in her 90s when
Mm-hmm.
she died. I was 11. And I just remember watching her on the porch talking to haints, as she called them, as to ghosts, shooing away ghosts, chewing her tobacco. And I didn't know what she was doing. I couldn't see what she was talking to. I couldn't see who she was talking to. It just looked like wind, it felt like
Right.
wind. But I was a little bit horrified by it, but also drawn to it. And I asked my mom and grandmother questions like, who is she talking to? And it was just, she's talking to a haint. It was just matter of fact. So as I got older, I became very obsessed with, what was it that she was seeing, as I was looking to, understand what
Mm-hmm.
had happened to my ancestors. I remember one particular visual that sticks out in my mind is of my grandmother, her daughter-in-law, seeing a man in a powder blue suit on her way to school one day, but he was
Mm-hmm.
headless and he was beckoning to her and he was leaning against a tree. And I don't, her telling that story just put this image in my head, even though I didn't see him. And it's one that I haven't been able to let go.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of that
Was
came up.
was there a context to her telling you this story, or it was just like, let me tell you a cool story?
Kind of just sitting around in our, on probably a summer day in this southern town, just telling, stories. I mean, there wasn't a whole. We didn't have cable at some point. We didn't have
Yeah.
phones, and that was part of it. Either it was jam sessions because my mom's a musician. Them her getting some people from the church over to practice, and there would be jam sessions, or there was prayer, or there was story swapping, and that was probably what happened on that day. We're just sitting around in the living room with a bunch of people talking. They were talking about the past, and so I don't know how it connected, but I just remember as a child that very, very vivid powder blue suit and the headless and the headless man
Do you
and the
ever see him
long
in your?
crooked
Do you ever
fingers.
see him in your dreams?
I didn't, but I wrote about him because he just seems so vivid.
Mm.
What I did see in my dreams were what I continue to see in my dreams are my ancestors, from great grandma Mary to grandmama Avis, Uncle Houston, I'm sorry, Grandpa Houston, her husband, uncles.
Wow.
And some of them are very, they create a yearning in me because I miss them and it feels so real. And then some of them have been scary. So I wake up and I try to jot down as much as I can remember.
Wow. What are
Yeah.
some of the scary ones?
One was of an uncle who, is beloved by his children. And in the dream, somehow it seemed like I was one of his kids too, my siblings and I, and we knew that he was dead. And we kept begging for him to be brought back, to come back. And when I dream, I usually go back to the house of my childhood, which was on Elm Street. I lived on Elm Street during Nightmare on Elm Street. So the kids would tease us like crazy as the bus was dropping us off. My nickname was Frederica, and they would just, they would,
No.
there goes Frederica. I was just
That
weird to
movie,
them.
that movie was shot at my junior high school, John Burroughs Junior High.
Oh, how funny.
I was like, no.
That's hilarious. I didn't know that. Oh my
Yeah.
gosh. Those kids were relentless. Oh my gosh, they were evil. Uh, but I guess to them I was weird because I was quiet and I stayed to myself. So I was just strange. And so as I would stand up, I just dreaded it when the bus driver, Mr. Saint Romain, would pull up in front of our Elm Street house and they would just start screaming, "There goes Frederica! Go to your..."
Man, kids are the worst.
They are. It's hilarious now, though. Um,
Oh, wait. I
so,
shouldn't say that to you, managing editor of LA Parent Magazine, but kids are the worst.
right? Kids are. That's funny. So where was I going with that though?
Oh, scary dreams.
Oh, scary dreams. And so in this dream, we're yearning for him, this uncle, to come back, to have him back, like kind of like a Santa Claus. And all of a sudden, he was back. He was sitting at the head of the table where I grew up. The kitchen table was this iron, old, rusted table, and we were so happy. We were like, oh, uncle's back, oh, uncle's back," and but he wouldn't look at us, and his head was down, and we put food in front of him, and he just was ravenous and devouring that food. And I remember my grandmother seeing, kind of with my mind's eye, my grandmother, who was very spiritual, a beautiful woman. She was at the sink, and she never turned around. She was just washing her dishes. And we were sad that he wasn't happy to see us the way we were happy to see him. And all of a sudden, he was gone. And I went outside, and there were two, I guess, graves, freshly dug graves, and they were empty. And there was some sort of these bowls or dishes on the side, like petri dishes, and I don't know what it was. Very scientific, like cells that had uh, morphed into this. There was very gelatinous, and somehow in my brain, in the dream, I knew that that uncle was connected to those freshly dug graves and this thing that was growing, this monstrous thing. And then the day went dark. And I was just like, this was not right. We were not supposed to bring him back. And I came back into the house. I looked at my grandmother and she said, y'all wanted him back. Y'all kept crying and y'all wanted them back. And I woke up like, oh, I don't want them
You know what? Fine.
back. They're fine. I don't know what I wrote it down. I told my mom, I don't know what it meant. They're definitely, maybe it's connected to some things that were in the book.
Uh-huh.
So yeah, it's things like that where it's just that bugged me for weeks. Like, what was this about?
Yeah.
Um, but all I can do is work. Once I awake, is work with it through writing and shaping and
Yeah. Yeah.
reflecting. Yeah.
Yeah. It's funny that pretty much everybody I talk to, um, like the ghost story is something that's passed down through generations.
Mm-hmm.
It's like
Mm-hmm.
whether it's our parents or grandparents, um, and there's this sense of like a weird, like by telling ghost stories, we're passing down some legacy, some lineage. Um, how do you how do you tell stories about your past to your kid? Like, do you include do you tell the story of like your great grandmother like talking to the ghost on the porch and things like that to your kid?
That's such an interesting thought. I think I've failed in that so far. So thank you, Chiwan, for this, because I really need to establish a tradition. I think because we don't live around any of my family, we're out here in LA, which is where his grew up, but his dad
Mm-hmm.
doesn't. He only has one brother. There are no cousins, and they don't have that family tradition of storytelling or any sort of like real gathering. And we get together for Christmas and some other holidays. But I think when we go, we're gonna go. This will be our first trip to see my family since the pandemic. That's something that we can do in that larger, space with family. Um,
Yeah.
and I just need to be more aware of that. Of course, I would say my ghost story so far to him is the real life story of, my great grandparents and what happened to Bert Bridges, my great grandfather.
Right.
So that's a real story, but it's also a ghost story because it's something that's been told through the generations. Um, and we don't know who Bert was. There are no records of him. So in some ways, he's a ghost. But that's probably I haven't shared with him some of those. Some of them were funny. It's like some of my grandfather's ghost stories were funny stories. I don't think I've told him about the headless man in the powder blue suit, and I don't know why. I guess I just haven't had those. We watch movies. He loves scary movies now that he's older. We've allowed him to start watching them. But yeah, that's something that I want to establish. So thank you.
Yeah, it's a my family talking about your dreams. My family, we made it a habit that when sitting down for a meal or something, we
Uh,
all tell each other all the crazy dreams we had. You know,
wow. No, we
and
do
then
talk about dreams.
yeah,
Yeah.
and then my dad would say stuff like, "Don't go outside today. You're gonna get hurt." Because I had a bad dream, and
Yeah.
then he'd go to work and I'd go out and bust my head open, and then he'd come home and be like, "I told you not to go
Right.
outside." I'm like, "Damn it."
Wow. So your family definitely were into interpreting dreams.
Yeah, my parents were really encouraging of that and also
Yeah.
really trusted like messages and dreams and
Wow.
things. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um it's funny, like my cousin just texted me like 2 days ago going, "Did something good happen?" I'm like, "No." I'm like, "Why?" She's like, "Oh, I had a dream about you." I was like, "Okay." More bills came, but that's about it.
Yeah. So you're waiting. You're still waiting on that good thing.
She's like, "Oh, something's good. Something good's gonna happen." I'm like, "Okay," but it's
Right.
like one of those things like we learn to trust each other, right? In a
Absolutely.
weird thing.
It's like
Um,
any belief, right?
yeah,
When my sister tells me she has a vision, I just believe it. And again, I think that even though I believe them, for some reason, I'm more skeptical of my own, part of that. legacy, part in that legacy. Although I did have a dream the other day about a loved one, and it was just he was dead, and it really disturbed me. And so I did. It was like 3 in the morning. I didn't. I don't like to tell people I dreamed that you were dead. I don't like that. But I just texted and said, "Are you okay?"
Mm-hmm.
Um, and come to find out, he'd been dealing with some suicidal thoughts that I
Mm.
just didn't know about. So that dream at least opened up the
Yeah,
door
yeah,
for us to talk about that.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Um, you know, I I've been thinking a lot about our friend, someone we both love, Natasha
Yes.
Chiwan. Um,
I'm reading her
and yeah,
appear.
her new book, and just thinking about like specifically, I wanted to ask you, um, especially with the history of your great grandpa and stuff, where for to be black in this country,
Mhm.
especially, uh, what does it mean when we talk about ghosts in this
Mhm.
country, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
Like, I've been so like just in the opening of Natasha's book, where it's like I've been all these different people, but I've always been black.
Right. Right.
Like, and that
Absolutely.
struck me so much.
Yeah.
So I wanted to ask you, like, from where it's like only like two generations away for you, like,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
But like
Mhm.
lynching is like two
Mhm.
generations away.
Right. Right.
So I mean, do you ever like what? I don't know how if I'm phrasing this question correctly. I think I've been thinking a lot about like sort of how when we talk about ghosts in this country, it's always some white kid who got killed by a horse or something.
Absolutely. Right.
Yeah,
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Or they're running in the woods, it's
yeah,
something
yeah,
to
yeah,
be afraid of. And it's interesting because I think about like, slavery and Jim Crow. It's, we weren't the only ones victimized by that.
yeah,
Like you're as a white person with those ancestors, you're carrying that DNA too. You're carrying that trauma too. And
yeah.
so I often think about that when I see all these movies with white people just screaming and running, but they're still, opening the doors, and we're the black people in the audience are like, "What are you doing?" We would never do that. Our ghosts aren't the same as your ghosts. So I think it is like when I think about some of these films, it's like how do these films relate to the unresolved, past and
Mm-hmm.
guilt?
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, absolutely. I think in reading, I've started it too. I know we're both going to be in conversation with her. I cannot wait. So I'm trying to like read and take all my notes. So there was one page where I wrote in the perishing, um, where the character, she's not sure. She has or they have a birth certificate, but it's not necessarily. And my grandparents had these delayed birth certificates because they didn't have those official papers to validate them, when they were born. And so years later, as adults, they get these delayed birth certificates. And her character has a birth certificate, but the date of birth is wrong. And I remember writing, and this was just last night, how do our ghost stories, or how do our imagined stories give form and structure to what was taken from us? We know that those people
Mm.
existed, even
Yeah.
though they weren't validated. All the missing records. It can be so heartbreaking and frustrating when you're trying to research, and so
Yeah.
we have to bring in imagination. We have to welcome in those ghost stories, those spiritual stories, to give validation and credence to these people, and humanity to these people who were taken away. So in that way, I think these ghost stories help us put flesh and blood and the circulatory system and bone, into our ancestors and our characters.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, um, your story reminds me of my grandma, my dad's mom,
Mm,
um, telling me that. when she was younger and she was pregnant with her youngest child, they lived in a house that was haunted by all these dead soldiers.
Mm, mm,
Like they would
mhm.
just like dozens and dozens of them would just walk around the house like all day nonstop.
Oh my gosh. See, I don't know what I would do in those situations.
And
Like,
and then she said, and I knew this kid that I was pregnant with was gonna struggle in life.
wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So and then she gave birth to a daughter, so my dad's youngest sister,
Mhm.
and she grew up and she and her husband couldn't have kids, right? So
Mm. Wow.
my grandma was like it was like something she knew would come. Like you know, it was like this, I'm going, wait, but what did the ghost have to do with that? You know, that was the
Yeah,
part I couldn't. I got it in a concept, like, oh
right.
wow, you're, but I couldn't tell what the connection was. And to this
Yeah.
day, I mull it over in my head, like, what is the connection to these
Y-
things? You
Yeah.
know,
And that's not
with
something she's been able to explain.
yeah, I mean, she's passed on, and I never got to ask her really,
Okay.
but
Okay.
um, yeah, I'm always curious, like what is my connection or someone's connection to the experience of the paranormal? You know, what
Mm,
is it supposed to, other than the pure experience? What is it?
right.
You know,
What's the purpose?
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
How is the impact where someone could go, oh no, my child's gonna have a tough time because this is happening in my house. What was she thinking? Like, what was she connecting?
Yeah. And how is that part of a longer legacy of knowing what dreams mean what or what
Yeah,
visions mean what?
yeah,
I'm very
yeah.
curious about that too. I'm always curious too when it comes to families, visions, and premonitions and experiences. What are we supposed to do with the knowledge?
Mm-hmm.
You know, because I want to be an optimist and I want to believe in transformation. I'm like, okay, that was very scary. Okay, but so now on the other side of that knowing, what can I do? I mean,
Right. No, I
so,
mean, I think it's the eternal question, right? Okay, okay, I believe you now. So
right.
now what happens?
How can I help this situation? I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah,
yeah, yeah.
yeah.
That haunts me. Um,
How do you think? How do you think you would feel if one day like your kid, unless he already has, your kid came to you and said, "Mom, I'm seeing these things."
I,
H- h-
that's when I would definitely start telling him about his family and what they've been seeing. So yeah, let me get on the other side of that, right? He does since he was little. He does, even though I haven't told ghost stories yet. We do talk about our dream stories. And he doesn't have a lot of night. There was one point where he was having some nightmares, just much younger. But he likes that waking up in the morning and saying, "Oh, I had a crazy dream," or "My dream seems so real," and we'll talk about that.
Mm.
Um, so yeah, I think that I would just use that to connect him to the stories or the dreams that his grandmother has, that his great grandmother, whom he never met, would have.
Mm.
Um, he has had. I've called him, just jokingly, a little prophet a couple of times. I remember in 2019, he had a dream that I won an award and had a book published. And
Oh
at that age, he didn't care
wow!
about all of that. And I was like, "Why are you dreaming this?" I was like, "That would be nice." He was like, "And then we had a parade, and there was confetti, and you bought me a
Wait.
$1,000
Did I
cell phone."
did I miss the parade?
Right? I still owe him that because that next year I did win an award.
Yeah.
Um and that's why I started teasing him. I was like, "Oh, wow, look at this. You're a little prophet." So maybe there's something as he's getting older now. I'm sure there are things that he's not telling me, but I'm gonna. This is encouraging me to go and ask him some questions, because I
Yeah.
think that those things are inherited. You know, they just
Oh,
look different in
definitely,
different family
definitely.
members.
Yeah,
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 yeah.
yeah. Um, speaking of Speaking of mothers telling their kids dreams, my mom, when ever since I was little, she would love having UFO dreams. Like it
Oh,
was like her favorite thing.
oh wow.
Then she said one day she goes, "Ah, it was so amazing. We were flying over the ocean and blah." And she goes, and she was like, "Kids, I love you guys, but if a spaceship came and wanted me to come, I'm out of here."
Oh wow. She was like in love. She
I
really
was
wanted to
like,
go.
I was like, wow. That's how it is. Wow.
That's amazing. Solomon, my son, does. He got obsessed at one point about lucid dreaming because he overheard his dad talking
Oh.
about how he learned how to do lucid dreaming.
Wait,
And
what?
that, yeah. Okay, maybe the whole family is weird.
All right. You've been holding back.
Yeah, my husband always, when I first met him, he talked about lucid dreaming and how you can teach yourself to lucid dream. So before going to sleep, saying, "I'm going to dream about this." In fact, there was one where he was, he was dating and he wanted to have a dream about this woman, and he had the dream.
Go on. I don't know if this is lucid dreaming,
I know,
but
right? No, but he said, and then he's flying, and then but it got very like wild and supernatural because he's had several dreams where he wanted to fly and he intentionally was flying. So my son was doing a lot of reading on lucid dreaming and listening to videos, interviewing his dad about how do you do it, and he would set his clock and. So he definitely is in. I don't think he's quite been successful,
mm.
but that's an area that fascinates him. I have to
And
check in.
your son's been picking that up.
Yeah. He's trying to inherit that lucid dreaming because he wants to fly. Like when his dad describes the flying, and he's like, I know what it feels like to fly because I was doing
Yeah,
it.
yeah, yeah.
So he wants to experience flying. Meanwhile, I just went and I just decided to just do the parachute, the skydiving. So that was my experience. Again, I exist on that practical, realm, and they thought I was crazy. You actually jumped out of a plane.
I mean, yeah.
I
I
was
don't
like, no,
know.
I really know what it feels like to fly in real life. Okay. Yeah.
You're like, oh yeah, go do your lucid dreaming about some woman you're dating.
Exactly. Exactly. Oh my god. But it's all fodder, right? For us writers. Like
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
all of
yeah.
it. Now
Well, I've seen what?
ghosts. You've seen
Yeah,
actual
yeah,
you've
yeah.
seen actual ghosts in the line. Do you have any advice for, you know, people who might experience that for the first time? Like what do you do? I've
I
often
mean,
wondered that, like what would I do?
I think, I mean, I know when I was a little kid, it would just, terrify
Yeah,
me,
right.
obviously,
Yeah.
but not because I thought it was a ghost, but as a kid, I was like, who is a stranger in my house? I mean, that's
Absolutely.
what freaked me out the most.
Yeah.
Um, I think sometimes, for me anyway, um, depending on how your life is, like if you're struggling and stuff like that, um, I sometimes find myself putting so much weight on it. Like,
Mhm.
like what was it trying to tell me? What was it supposed to mean? Because I
Yeah.
need answers because it's hard right now. You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
I think we put all kinds of hopes on it, all kinds of fears on it, and like for a longest time, I had this chronic like physical problem, and
Hmm.
so I was constantly trying to figure out what it all meant and what it was all about. And so I would think about ghosts and this and that, just trying to make sense of it all. And I think um, there's something beautiful about it, but at the same time, it's like it becomes a crutch, you
Hmm.
know.
Interesting.
So yeah,
That's
it
very
is.
interesting.
Yeah, it's like depending on what you're going through, it's like you want it to be something, just like we do with everything else. Like we want it to mean something, either less or more than it is.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh wow, that just really hits my gut. I mean, after you write, as you know, whether it's a poem, a collection of poems, a book, etc., and you think you know why you're writing it, you have your premise, your motivations, but then it's after, especially after it's published and it's out in the world, it's not really yours. Um, Reflecting on, okay, what was underneath the motivations and what was underneath those motivations. And so
Yeah.
my obsession with Bert Bridges, I realized at some point after sending it off that wow, I was really looking for something really beautiful and positive in my bloodline, full of potential, which really ties back to my own potential and my own, you know what does that say, my obsession with him, what did that say about my own failures and inability to accept my failures, or faults, or whatever it is. And I don't know. I
Yeah.
just think it's interesting to step back, whether you're obsessed with your real life ghosts or your story, and see what does this represent.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, before we go, can you share a little bit of writing with us?
Oh, okay. Did you have anything particular? When I opened it up, because I just never know what I'm going to read, I opened it up straight to the part that says Grandma Mary believed in ghosts.
There you go.
But then I was like, did I read this last time we were together?
I don't care.
They don't know.
I listen to the same song 400 times a day, so it's
Oh,
okay.
that's right. Oh, and you're breathing after your tailoring. Oh my gosh, I love it. I love all those posts. I've heard some of them and seen some of them, but I've got to go listen to the whole thing. It is amazing. It is
Yeah.
amazing. Okay, so I'll just read like 2 pages.
Yeah.
Okay.
Perfect.
Okay, so this chapter is called Cords That Bind. Grandma Mary believed in ghosts. She was always telling of some sighting, a headless man in a powder blue suit with a hand stretching forth its fingers. Was it Bert paying her visits? Or was it his murderers coming to plead with her? Walking up to our yard on the way home from school, I would catch sight of her sitting in her usual spot on the porch, spitting snuff into an empty hair grease jar and staring into nothing. Her half closed eyelids were like the insides of black olives, velvety and moist. Her lips would move, two thin and tremulous things at war with each other. My stomach would sink with knowing she was at it again. There goes a haint, she used to say calmly to noises that seemed, to my untrained ear, like ordinary sounds caused by the wind. Get on away from here, she would say to the air. Get on away from here. Ain't nobody studying. I was studying her. Eyes and ears and skin were studying her. Sense recordings stored in the subconscious. Unlike Grandma Mary, I'm not sure the disembodied can come back as ghosts, but I do know the past is a ghost. I know that what the captors and lynchers gave us were ghost stories, the omission of records, the uncounting, the 3/5 or less of everything. They wanted us to be ghosts, here but not here. Now they call us delusional. A better diagnosis is that we are the deluded. I scour books and articles on America's lynchings. Whenever I open the book without sanctuary, I find it hard to pull myself away from its pages of photographs and stories of men and women who were lynched in this country, some as late as the 1960s. The book consists of reprinted postcards boasting images of men and women hanging from trees, bridges, and poles. The hated skin was stabbed, carved, peeled, and burned. The mobs would keep souvenirs of the mutilated bodies, eyes, genitals, teeth, kneecaps, ears, fingers, hearts. I searched the expressions of the white people standing on the ground, watching the source of their hatred suspended in air. Sometimes the white people's eyes hold a hollow expression. In other photographs, they are full of smug justification, of joy, if joy can be sullied and smeared and commingled with evil. I see them, but cannot hear them. Each thick page of Without Sanctuary takes me back in time with its images presented in black and white, sepia, and full color. Pictures of my people, disfigured, grotesque, dehumanized. I wonder if Bert's lynchers stripped him first, or if they let him remain fully clothed, if they stabbed him and burned him, or kept his body in one piece. Were the men who stood on the ground staring up at Bert's body wearing vested suits and pocket watches, or denim overalls? Were the women smiling into the lenses of cameras? Was the shutter quick enough to capture their souls? Did the little children clutch Bibles? Do they look at the red-rimmed pages of the New Testament and see blood?
Wow. Thank you so much for that beautiful, beautiful writing. We Are Bridges, amazing book, deserving of all the awards and a parade.
I'm waiting on that one. We can just have
thank
a
you.
big party
Yeah,
for
thank you everyone for joining us today for Are You There, Ghost? It's me, Chiwan. We had the amazing Cassandra Lane, who's just an awesome, awesome person. And please go out and pick up a copy of We Are Bridges. Wait a minute, it's 2021. Don't go out. Just order it online. It'll come to your door. Pick it up. It's amazing, beautiful. Once again, Cassandra Lane. Check out all her news on cassandralane.net. And thank you.
Thank you so much, Chiwan. This is amazing. Thank you.